go. And with that, I wish to introduce Gordo to talk about the ASDB multiple feed. I guess he's talked to us before about flight tracking software, which is really cool stuff, and I know several people have run their own. And now he's gonna tell us how we can do multiple ones. So please welcome Gordo.
Thanks, Craig. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
And
what about my screen sharing? Is that working, or?
Is it possible to make it a little bigger? Zoom in?
That's as big as, is that good?
That's good.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
Okay, well, thanks, Craig, and thanks everybody for showing up this morning. This is going to be more of a survey of what's possible rather than an actual how-to, because I got a job on Monday and I've been busy doing that instead of focusing on this during my COVID off time. So, yeah, this will be a continuation. And what I'll do is I'll quickly review the hardware for anybody who's new to this, introduce the 5 other feeder sites in addition to the 2 that we already know about, recommend the installation order so that they all play nice together, revisit installing FlightAware's feeder, and then discuss any issues with installing the other feeders, and take a look at the virtual radar views of all of them. So for anybody who's not familiar, planes transmit either ADSB or MODES on the 1090 megahertz. And when they've got the ADSB working, it reports their GPS position and airspeed, in addition to their identification and altitude. Whereas MODES just identifies the aircraft and its altitude. And then some of the feeders, they derive the location by using neighboring feeders, knowing the position, and then triangulate it that way. What you need, oh, somebody disappeared. Can everybody still hear me? Raise your hands. Okay, good.
I can.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just saw Mark disappeared. That's all. So I wanted to make sure. So this is what the little unit looks like. I've got my little Pi. And then this is it's basically a TV tuner dongle. And then it's got its little antenna. Craig has a really good link to someone who has expanded upon this and talks a lot more about the hardware. And I've posted a link to that article at the very bottom of my post here, or my article here. And so, yeah, you need the USB dongle and then one USB port. Now the dongle, if you saw, is quite big, so it sort of overlaps the neighboring port. What I have mine is, I've got it plugged into like a 15 foot, or no, hang on, 25 foot long USB extension. So the extension is quite a bit smaller at that end. You need a Raspbian, or you can also go with like Arch Linux or something like that. But most of them are geared towards Raspbian. And then location for your antenna with no obstructions, preferably outside. I've got mine in a window in my apartment. Optionally, you'd want accounts with the various services if you plan to feed data to them and get the perks out of them. And I won't be going into setting up accounts, but I'm pretty sure everybody's got that under control. You'll need to know your latitude, longitude, and elevation of the antenna for the MLAT calculations. And I mean, you can get that information from your smartphone. And then if you're doing headless, you can, SSH access and, a static IP. And Craig, I'm not going to be talking about IPv6.
I am sad.
Yeah, well, I'm still not a convert when it comes to this.
Okay.
So that's what you need. Now, all of the components, how they come together is that there's this driver that interfaces with the dongle, and it's the driver is librtlsdr0, and most of the dump 1090s come with that or install that as a dependency. And dump 1090 has evolved over the years. It was first written by Anti-Res. And then when I started feeding, the most popular one was the Malcolm Robb fork. And then, I think it was for the last presentation, the big one was the mutability fork. And now FlightAware has its own based off of the mutability, and Flight Radar 24 forks from the Malcolm Robb. So because they both, sorry, I should clarify, Flight Radar 24 and FlightAware are sort of the two of the biggest. And because they both have their own versions of dump 1090, you need to pick which one you want to install. And, there's also something like 979 other forks out there. And all of the feeders rely on dump 1090, but they don't really care as much about where they get the data from. However, most of them recommend the mutability. And since PiAware was based off of mutability, sorry, that's the FlightAware package. Since PiAware is based off of mutability, that's the one that I recommend starting with. We now have, or I am now feeding to 7 different services, and I've provided a brief overview of all of them. And I've got them alphabetical, so there's no preference right now, but I will explain some of the benefits to all of them. And so starting with ADSB Exchange, this one was a relatively recent one that I discovered. And they describe them as a co-op, and they also feature that they do not filter out military or private aircraft. And the cool thing about that is sometimes I see aircraft flying overhead and I'm like, oh, I wonder who that is. And I fire up, say, Flight Radar 24, but it's not on there. And that's because they have some agreements or something with the FAA and other places that they will mask out. I was reading that the Japanese Prime Minister, his plane is what they made a request to the service to mask them out as well. So ADSB Exchange is unfiltered, so you can see all of that. ADSB Hub is just a crowdsourced, sort of a repository, and you can, when you're feeding, you can then either look at their online radar, or you can pull their data down if you want to do more with it. AirNav RadarBox is, I say was one of the, it probably is the earliest commercial flight tracker, certainly that I knew of. And you have, up until recently, you had to purchase one of their specialty hardware systems that they called the RadarBox to decode ADSB and Mode S. And that gave you access to their premium membership, and at a discounted rate. I think it was like the first year free, and then you paid a nominal amount. Now they permit, you know, all of these Linux and other, or sorry, Pi and others to submit and get free membership. I used to use RadarBox when I was working at the airport to, because we would sneak home during the flights and we would monitor the flights taking off, and then race back when we saw them take off from Seattle, and hopefully beat them back. Flight Radar 24 is one of the commercial ones, and it's probably the most well-known. You know, a lot of media places like CNN use screenshots of flight radars plots for, you know, especially if there's an incident that they're reporting on. And Flight Radar 24 offers a business tier for membership for feeding data, and I think that's something like $90 American per month. Their online virtual radar is the best of the bunch, and their 3D view is really impressive. And in a bit, I'll be going over the various online radars so you can get a feel of what they look like and the differences between them. FlightAware is another commercial one where their focus is more on tracking flights and notifying. And so I use it a lot when I have friends and family flying. I'll plug in all of their flight information, and then I'll set a watch for the day that they take off. And the watches will actually notify you of, like, if there's a delay, if they've diverted, if there's an incident, and of course, you know, when they're off and on, and all of that. Their virtual radar is not the greatest. Your membership for supplying data kind of offers a little bit more, but it's still not super. As I said, I use it more for just the notification feature. OpenSky Network, it's another crowdsourced service, and they use it for, or sorry, you can submit data not only to view the virtual radar, but also researchers can download the data to study all sorts of things so that, you know, they can make the flying world better. And then finally, there's Plane Finder, and it's all right. You know, it's sort of like Flight Radar 24 without a 3D view. They call their premium subscription the gifted sharer subscription. And I think the only thing about this one that is kind of cool is that you can plot, or you can track multiple flights at the same time. So for...
Hey, Gordo.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask, what do you mean by track multiple flights at the same time? Aren't they all transmitting on 1090?
Oh, sorry. You can, like on most of the virtual radars, you can click on a plane, and then it will track and well, actually, I can just show you here. I'm going to move this over here. So this is Flight Radar 24.
Right.
And when you click on it, it shows where it's been. So with Plane Finder, you can actually track, like, oh, here's a blocked one. But you can track multiple flights at the same time. So you'd have multiple paths, like a path going here and a path going here. I don't really know why that would be beneficial unless you're watching, like one day I was watching, or I was preparing for this presentation, and Google had launched their balloons for, I can't remember what it's called, but they've got this initiative where they're doing internet by balloon.
Right.
And I saw two of them take off from like the Arizona area and one take off from California. And they were all trending up through the strait here. And it would have been, I guess it would have been kind of interesting to have plotted all three of those to see how they all moved, rather than, you know, on Flight Radar, I had to click on each one and see their plot.
Okay, I see what you mean now.
Yeah.
Just as an aside, Gordo, I watched those guys come up from Arizona, and then they got about halfway up the island and then turned around and went back.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch them that long, but that's cool.
Wait, if they're balloons, how do they go back?
Magic.
Yeah.
Okay.
They actually change their altitude. They get all of the stuff from information from NOAA, winds aloft, and that information, and then they'll just change their altitude plus or minus a few thousand feet, and they can go almost anywhere they want.
Okay. All right. Well, sorry, didn't mean to sidetrack the presentation. Just was curious about the multiple tracking.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Okay, so installation, I'm not going to dive into it that much, but just I have found that installing FlightAware first, of course, gives you the dump 1090 and, of course, the driver. And then I go with Flight Radar 24 because I really like their subscription and the features of their website. So I like to have that one up and going as soon as possible. And then I pick or I install Plane Finder, AirNav RadarBox, OpenSky Network, and then ADSB Exchange in generally that order, but I'm not as picky about it, because once you have dump 1090, you just instruct them as they install to rather than installing one of their own, or sometimes you have to install dump 1090 and then theirs, you just can ignore that first little bit and point it to the dump 1090 that was installed by FlightAware. ADSB Hub is a little bit of a strange beast in that you don't have any dedicated software on your Pi or other. You open port 30,003 and they then connect to that. And basically this is one of the many ports that these all tie into. There's a few different ports and they output different types of information. And this one outputs SBS, and I think that's what they informally called beast mode. There's also like raw mode and something else, but they all have differing levels of detail. And ADSB then just connects with it, and then all of the processing is done on their servers, which is a different way to do things. Now, I've got screenshots, but I'm going to go live here. So I'm going to slide this back over. And here are the 7 online virtual radars. FlightAware is, as I said, one of the coolest. There's lots of different layers that you can apply to it. One of the neatest things is to go to 3D view. So I'm going to pick a plane like this one. Actually, is there anything coming into Vancouver? No, we'll just stick with that one. And we go to 3D view. And you can follow the flight from this perspective or a more inboard perspective. And when Boeing did their MAX flight back a few days before I did my first presentation, I actually did an onboard and watched it land at Payne Field in Washington. So I'm going to go back to that.
So you're basically saying pilots always have somebody looking over their shoulder.
Yeah, nowadays. Too bad we couldn't, like, hey, wake up, or, where are you going?
Yeah. So
this is Flight Aware, and their live radar is pretty lame. I mean, it does the job. But as I said, their notification system is quite good. You can also, with the premium membership, you can dig back through the history. I think it's 8 months, and they'll show you what plane it was, et cetera, et cetera. Plane Finder, again, this one is a sort of a cheap knockoff of Flight Radar 24. When we click on an airplane, another panel comes up just like Flight Radar 24. It does the job. OpenSky. This is user submitted data. I don't know if they get FAA. So like a lot of the commercial companies also draw in data from the FAA radar stations and stuff. And then they use the user submitted data to confirm and add to it. So I'm not sure if this shows everything. I mean, if we compare it against this, I mean, I think it's showing a few less. It's certainly not showing these guys. And that could also be the fact that maybe Deed doesn't have his set up with Plane Finder, and there's nobody on the peninsula. It's hard to say. AirNav RadarBox. It's pretty cool. It's got this sort of cloud overlay thing. I don't like it because it's got these, sort of bubble text box that follow the planes around. I'm sure there's a way to turn it off. I just haven't spent a lot of time poking around it because, I just go to Flight Radar 24. And here is ADSB Hub. And you can see Seattle's pretty stacked up. Or did this crash? I'm just going to refresh this, see what's going on here. Some of them are good about remembering your location, and this one isn't. So, oh yeah, I forgot. This is as far as you can zoom in with ADSB Hub. I guess they don't want to overload their servers. And then finally, ADSB Exchange. And I guess I missed that blocked one. Yeah. I should have flipped over to this one first, because then you could have maybe seen it, flying up here, and we would have been able to get some more information out of it, hopefully.
Odds are U.S. military, right?
Probably, yes. Now, Most of the feeders also have their own little web servers or tie into Apache or Nginx, and you can view them locally. The problem I found is that I have Pi-hole installed, and Pi-hole likes to intercept all of the connections and say, oh, did you mean to go to the admin page? So I started working on figuring out how to allow just the local ones go through, but I ran out of time. And the other thing is that, I can just go to the online ones. The other option is if I truly do want to see what's happening locally, I have installed a virtual radar server on my Windows machine, and then I can connect to it, and it produces this. And so right now, this is all I'm seeing from my little Pi. And as Deed was mentioning, there's not a lot of traffic these days compared to non-COVID times. And during the week, it's quite interesting because I'll often pick up Boeing test flights or Boeing delivery flights. They often fly along Olympic Ridge here, and it's pretty cool to see them. And go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Another quick intervention. I'm currently tracking 8 aircraft. And yesterday I saw 2 737 Maxes with Boeing flight numbers flying from Boeing Field to Moses Lake and back.
Oh, cool. Yeah, you're in a better position than I am. I'm in an apartment building that faces south, so that's pretty much all I get is, and I don't have a very big antenna. I'm just using that little stock one.
So Gordo, are you not able to put these different softwares on different ports so that you don't have the Pi-hole problem?
Well, even on the different ports, Pi-hole steals them for some reason.
Oh, okay.
So
maybe you need to put Pi-hole in a Linux container and give it its own IP address.
Yes. I also did try experimenting with putting these into containers. It's just that almost all of them want to be on Raspbian. And a lot of the containers, certainly I was working with LXC, and they didn't have a Raspbian distro.
Yeah, you might be able to get away with a Debian one, but yeah.
Yeah. And well, I tried the Debian, and you then had some of them you had to like recompile, and then they complained about a whole bunch of things because they were, yeah. So yeah. I just gave up on that. And my solution is that Pi that I have a photograph of is going to be my my flight tracking Pi, and my other Pi is going to be my Pi-hole.
Sure, or you could get an open WRT router and run AdBlock and then free up a Pi.
Yeah, that's true.
But anyway, I'm sorry, I don't mean to. I was just figuring out a way that you might be able to access the management on different ports, but
yeah,
Pi-holes being a bit of a pain.
Yeah, it seems to intercept everything. I was able to get past some of it, and then one of my solutions just broke the are you sure you mean to go to the admin panel page, basically by stripping out all of the CSS. So I gave up on it because I knew that I had another alternative. But if people are stuck with one Pi and they really want to have Pi-hole, it doesn't cohabitate nicely.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah. And yeah, the little virtual radar, again, it plugs into, see, it uses a different port and it plugs into my Pi. I just used the wizard, and it bounced me through a whole bunch of questions, and you know, ta-da! Here's the configuration, and that's my short and sweet presentation. If anybody has any questions. Oh, never mind. I did show off the virtual radar.
Gordo, what flavor of Pi are you running this on?
The most recent. Oh, flavor Pi. Sorry. This one is on a 2 right now, but I have this 3 that I'm going to be putting it on.
I'm just wondering because I'm running mine on a Pi, one of the original Pi 1.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it probably wouldn't be happy with all of those extra things on it.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, what you could do is install dump 1090 on it and then have the other ones elsewhere.
Okay. Can you run a top to see how busy that little Pi is?
Oh, my Pi?
Yeah.
Oh, Deed's Pi.
Gordo's Pi.
My Pi.
You're the one that's running seven separate things.
Yeah.
.6 load, that's not bad. Because it's got 4 cores. If you press 1, do you get to see multiple cores?
I press 1.
Yeah, press 1 in the terminal, just the number 1.
Yeah.
Guess not. All right, some tops will show you the individual cores.
Anything else?
Yeah, look, I'm surprised with that many services running. Do you have an idea of how much traffic it's passing?
No. I mean, I mean, my location is pretty poor, so I don't have a lot of traffic.
So you think it's only actually sending data upstream when there's a plane that's coming by?
I believe that the feeders do that, yes. Because they probably don't want to be bombarding their servers all the time with nothing.
Sure.
Reports, right?
How about a netstat-an? Can we see what that looks like?
Well, he's doing that just for the sake of the argument. My single core Pi 1 is running at 0.67 load average.
One service.
Just Flight Radar 24.
Yeah, I should have told you to pipe that through more because you get all the Unix sockets we don't care about. It's got quite a few things going there.
Yeah, so all the 3005s are the feeder or the dump 1090 stuff. So anywhere from like 3002 to 3005 are feeder ports, or sorry, 30,003 to 30,005.
Right.
And did you want to see anything else, or you?
No, that works for me. I was just kind of curious.
And I made this little custom message of the day thing to, which takes a little bit to, unless I broke my, oh, there we go. So this pops up every time I log in to see how long, because there was a time where Flight Radar 24, their feeder kept crashing. And then I would get an email from them saying, oh, you haven't submitted in X number of days. And they've since corrected that. Yeah, it just helps me keep an eye on things.
So you have your MOTD running a little script then?
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we need a presentation of that at the Linux SIG.
Oh, well, no, all I did was rather than call the MOTD, I just made a script called Pi, and that executes when the shell fires up. So it's a poor person's message of the day.
Okay, yeah, it still sounds like a clever little script.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I can. Oops. Oh, that's the script.
Oh, I see what you're doing. Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. Borrowed from somewhere else and added to every time I add a new feeder. I should have 2, 4, 6. Oh, the only one I'm missing is ADSB hub, because it works on its server and just pulls, 30,003 port, which I opened up.
Is that the only one that required you to open up a firewall port?
Yep. The rest are just communicating on my Pi and then feeding outwards.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know as if there's any benefit to the way the ADSB hub handles it. I guess, maybe eventually when they get so many people feeding, they may decide that that's too much work for their server and decide to make their own client and get some of the crunching done locally. Because there's also like the MLAT stuff that goes on with most of them to calculate, to help triangulate where the plane is when they're not transmitting ADSB, but just the mode S.
Do you have an idea of how many planes are doing ADSB versus mode S?
Not offhand. And things are changing a little bit in that the FAA is now experimenting with the 978 megahertz, and they're going to use that for aircraft that are that fly below 18,000 feet. And so, that's a lot of private stuff. And so I think that there's probably going to be a big push for all aircraft to move from mode S to the 978, because I think primarily the civil or the private aviation is the ones that have the mode S or nothing at all. And so I think that they're going to work on trying to get everybody off of mode S and onto 978, and then anybody who just doesn't have it will probably be mandated to have it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, sure. So what about the ADSB via satellite? Do you have any information about that?
No, I don't. Yeah, I'm aware of it, but that's about it. I mean, that certainly would have helped for poor MH370.
Right.
If they had a satellite there. That's the other thing, is that, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, who would have thought to have something like that there? Because that was one of the things my friends were asking me. They're like, why weren't they tracking it? And I'm like, they only track where aircraft typically go. They don't track the whole world just for the sake of it, because that's a lot of data and a lot of expensive equipment out there waiting for that one chance of a flight going astray.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the newer aircraft have ADSB via satellite.
Mm-hmm.
They show up on the Flight Radar 24 map in blue, light blue. So if I'm looking at right now, much of the stuff going over to Asia from North America is blue. If you look at the Flight Radar map and zoom it out.
Oh, yeah.
That's good to know.
Cool. Yeah. Oh, there's one of the balloons.
Yeah.
They got a whole bunch of them.
There's a bunch down here in the Caribbean too. If you go through your filters, Gord, and set them to say 45 or 50,000 feet, that'll toss most of the rest of the stuff away and leave you the balloons.
Oh, there we are. And
How do you get that to take effect?
You know,
oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So I guess the balloons down here are at a different. Oh no, they're there. Yeah, they deployed a bunch of them for the earthquake at Haiti, and I guess they must still be doing that.
And these aren't tethered; they're just floating around.
Yep. See, you can see the.
Yeah, if you look at that one, you'll see that I think the altitude's probably. I can't see it, but what's the altitude on that guy?
62,400 feet.
feet. Clearly not tethered.
You can get roped
Are
out.
you sure?
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have quite a balloon to hold that rope up, even.
Yeah.
True. So I guess these things are like, sort of like, what do they call those? Like unmanned aerial vehicles or whatever, and
That's what they look like.
Yeah, and that's and then then there's the envelope. That's the envelope, and then it is a trailing bit that comes down from it that holds the the payload.
And how long do these things stay aloft?
Days, weeks.
And then they recover them, I guess, and shoot them up again.
Yeah.
Best I can tell, they have really pretty much complete control over them. If you read the Wikipedia article, they've there's half a dozen or so have crashed in various places, but mostly they. Now I'm assuming these are all Google loons, but they may not be. I mean, this is the picture of any balloon.
Yeah, I saw one private balloon a couple days ago, and it was at about, I think it was 3,100 feet, and it had taken off from Vancouver and was just sort of flying south over Point Roberts area. So it was probably and it was like really early in the morning, so some early morning sightseeing, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really beautiful morning too. Just like when we had that balloon that took off in the Central Saanich area and scared all the cows.
Mostly the horses, but
horses too, yes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that balloon.
Yeah, I did too. Yeah.
Well, I missed it.
Yeah. Yeah, people were annoyed that it was scaring the horse, and of course, because balloons, you never know quite where it's going to land. If the winds aren't favorable, they were landing in people's properties, and they were getting all bent out of shape over that.
So are these like propane fired, or the helium?
The Google ones?
Yeah, any of them.
I think the Google ones are helium, and they've got a compressor on board. So they, when they want to go down a little bit, they turn the compressor on and compress some helium back into the tank. And when they want to go up, they release it out of the tank.
Wow, that's going to take some energy.
Huge solar panels. Huge solar panels.
Where are those mounted?
They're below They hang below the balloon in the payload area, above the payload.
Yeah, I'll try and find a photo of the full thing. So that's them starting to fill it up. And, oh, here we go. See, here's their solar panel and all their equipment. Although I don't know what this one is. Wing. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Had no idea.
And then Deed had sent me a screenshot of the Transport Canada aircraft that does the testing of the ILS, so the Instrument Landing System, and so they sort of come screaming in and follow the glide slope in, and then they quickly peel off, and they do it, I don't know, probably 30, 40 times in a session just to test that everything's working. And so Dee did sent me this picture of this big spaghetti of all this flight track of the one plane. So that was pretty cool. And on the older presentation I have, I'm just going to move this aside. So here's the first presentation I did, and I think it's got, okay, so here's a Boeing 737 MAX, the first flight.
Cool.
And this is a screenshot of the older Dump 1090. Of course, Google has made their maps, you got to start paying to use them. And so most people most Dump 1090s are now moving towards like OpenStreetMap. So yeah, so here's the test flight of the 737 MAX. And then, oh yeah, this was an interesting one that happened to show up a few days before I presented the original one. And it was this research aircraft, and I'm not sure what it was doing. Did you happen to remember, you came up with an idea of what it might have been doing?
I used to work at the National Research Council and Flight Research Section.
Yeah.
The Convair, I think, was used as a radar, for synthetic aperture radar.
Okay.
Like for Earth resources type monitoring, and probably for weather, wave, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember correctly, but I can certainly find out because I still have friends who work there.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it was just, I was working on the presentation and I heard this thing buzzing around, and of course, the engine sounded quite distinct, and I fired up and I was like, holy, what are they doing?
Well, it's interesting. It looks like he's spending most of his time around both the airport and then the seaplane base.
Yes.
So,
what was the date of that flight?
Well, I presented this in 2016, so February 10th.
Okay.
And so it would have been maybe the 8th or 9th.
Okay, about around then. I'll just ask out of curiosity what they were doing.
Yeah.
And then I'll let you know.
Oh, cool. And the Coast Guard now has a dash 8, one of the old 100s or 200s, and it comes buzzing overhead. And I've been meaning to try and catch it on the radar to see where it goes, because, you know, a Dash 8 certainly isn't going to land in the harbor, and I have no idea why it's almost like it overflies the Coast Guard base for some reason. But it could be that it comes down the peninsula and then comes out over the water this way and goes around. It's so hard to say. And that's why I'd like to try and catch it and see where it goes. I could also look up the history of it on these various services. I just haven't had a chance. Oh, hey, Mark. That's all, folks.
Thank you.
I'm open to any more questions, and if not, that's all, folks.
Well, I'll just say thank you, and I'll send the recording to. I guess I'll send the link to the recording. The recording will be on a Google Drive, and then you can take it and do what you want with it after I'm finished. It'll be a day or so before I get it done.
Thanks, Murray, and thanks, Gordo, for the excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, Gordo, thanks a lot. Appreciate it.